The rear brakes on the W204 are comprised of floating calipers. This means the calipers are attached to mounts by sliding bolts and have only one piston on one side of the caliper, as indicated by the red arrow. To change out the caliper, begin by removing the brake pad wear sensor from the holder on the right side of the caliper, red arrow. Pull the wear sensor straight out from the mount on the caliper, red arrow. Then remove it from the pad, yellow arrow. You should be able to pull it from the pad by hand, but if it is stuck, use a set of small needle nose pliers to remove it, using care if you are planning to reuse the sensor. If you are reusing your pads before the wear sensor has activated, there is no reason why you cannot reuse it. If it has worn down, you should be replacing both the pads and the wear sensor. Use an E10 torque to remove the bolt from the wear sensor housing and the housing from the caliper, red arrow. You are going to be transferring this to the new caliper. Use a set of pliers or a pry bar and pry the retaining spring out from the front of the caliper, red arrow. Remove the two protective caps from the slide bolts, then use a 7mm Allen to remove the bolts. These are the bolts that the caliper slides on, red arrow. They should be smooth and free of any corrosion. Clean up the bolts with a little emery paper and lubricate them before reinstalling them in the new caliper. Depending on how worn your rotors and pads are, you will need to compress the piston back into the caliper. Since you are going to have to bleed the system, there is no need to push dirty old fluid back into the system. Use an 11mm flared nut wrench, yellow arrow, to open the bleed nipple when compressing the piston back to make room to remove the caliper. Always only use a flared nut wrench on bleed nipples and brake lines and hoses. The wrench is designed to grasp 6 sides of the soft fitting and prevent it from stripping. Remove the protective cap from the bleed nipple and attach a hose to the nipple and run it to a catch bottle. Then, using your 11mm flared nut wrench, red arrow, open the bleed nipple and compress the piston back into the caliper to give you enough room to clear the rotor and remove the caliper from its bracket. With the piston compressed, you can now remove the caliper from the mount. Be prepared to hang the caliper or place it on something at a height that will not put any stress on the brake hose or line. Never let the caliper hang from the brake line. The pad on the piston side will come with a metal clip that holds it in position in the caliper and piston. Pull the old pad out if you are planning on reusing it in the new caliper. The pads will be marked with F for front and R and L for right and left side. The outside pad will come with an anti-squeal pad on the back. This is just a sticky material that helps hold the pad in place and prevents squeals. Push the old pad off the caliper, clean up any residue from the old backing, and install the new pad. If you are reusing the old pads, you may want to install a new anti-squeal backing, so make sure you have ordered it. You are going to disconnect the brake hose or line from the caliper. You will need to spin the caliper around the line as the other end is fixed to a hard line. Fluid is going to escape from the line and caliper, and it is very, very slippery. Be prepared to remove the old caliper and install the new one quickly to limit the amount of brake fluid that will escape the line. You are going to have to bleed the system. You do not want enough brake fluid draining out, so you introduce air into the BAS system. If air enters the system through the reservoir, you will need to put the vehicle into the BAS bleed mode with someone who has the proper tools. Make sure to use the proper tool. On this vehicle, a 14mm flared nut wrench, red arrow. This wrench will grasp the hose fitting on 6 sides and save you from damaging it. Installation of the new caliper is the reverse of removal. You must completely bleed your brake system before you drive the vehicle. Do not attempt to drive the car until you have completely bled the brake system. Please see the link at the end of this video for our brake bleeding article and additional assistance. Thanks for watching. Click here to view the original article along with hundreds of other DIY content for your car.